Okay.
Ever had one of those days where like some harmless comment just totally sends you spiraling? Like you suddenly feel so inadequate, you just want to disappear.
Yeah.
That's what we're diving deep into today.
Yeah.
Shame.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're unpacking Brené Brown's research on shame, especially as it impacts women, based on her book, I Thought It Was Just Me.
It's so interesting because shame is often called like a full contact emotion
Oh.
because it just hits us so hard and on so many levels. So we're going to explore not only what shame is, but also how to build resilience against it.
Okay.
So you can walk away with some really tangible tools.
I love that,
Right.
tangible tools, because I think a lot of us can relate to feeling shame, but we might not always recognize it or
Right.
know what to do about it.
Exactly.
So first things first, how do we even define shame?
Right.
Is it just another word for like guilt or embarrassment?
It's definitely in the same family,
Okay.
but shame is unique. Think of it this way. Guilt is about feeling bad for something you did, while shame is about feeling bad for something you are.
Oh.
It's that sense of being fundamentally flawed or unworthy.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction.
Yeah.
So it's not just, I made a mistake, it's, I am a mistake.
Exactly.
That's heavy stuff.
It is, and that's where Brown's concept of the shame web comes into play.
Okay.
Imagine a web of societal expectations,
Mm-hmm.
often differing based on, things like gender, race, or class.
Right.
These expectations dictate who we should be.
Uh-huh.
And when we don't measure up, shame can trap us.
So it's not just our own inner critic.
Right.
There are all these external pressures adding to the shame pile.
Yes. And those pressures can be so intense, especially for women.
Right.
Brown found that women are often held to these impossible standards, like having to be the perfect mother
Yeah.
and a successful career woman at the same time,
Yeah.
all while looking effortlessly put together.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like we're supposed to juggle flaming torches
Right.
while walking a tightrope. Exactly.
And then shame ourselves when we inevitably drop a torch
Yeah.
or lose our balance.
It's exhausting.
So exhausting.
And this is where shame starts to get really insidious.
Okay.
It sets off this vicious cycle, first triggering fear,
Mm-hmm.
and then leading to blame, either directed at ourselves or projected outward.
So let's say a woman is struggling financially.
Right.
The shame might make her afraid to ask for help.
Right.
And then she might end up blaming herself for not being good enough or lashing out at her partner
Yeah.
for not making enough money.
Precisely. And that blame just reinforces the cycle, making us feel even more powerless
Right.
and trapped.
Yeah.
But here's the good news. Brown's research also points to a powerful antidote, empathy.
Empathy. So just feeling sorry for ourselves.
Rah.
I'm not sure that's going to break this cycle.
Not quite. It's not about self-pity.
No.
It's about both giving and receiving genuine understanding. Think of it this way. Shame thrives in isolation.
But empathy creates connection. It's like shining a light in a dark room.
Okay, so if that woman who's struggling financially could open up to a friend and be met with compassion instead of judgment, that could actually help diminish the shame.
Absolutely. And Brown's research found that empathy is actually one of the 4 key elements of building shame resilience. The others are recognizing shame and your triggers,
Okay.
developing critical awareness of your personal shame web,
Mm-hmm.
being willing to reach out for support,
Okay.
and speaking shame, which is about finding your voice to challenge those harmful expectations.
This is starting to feel like a toolkit for tackling shame, which I love.
Yeah.
But let's break it down a bit.
Okay.
What does it mean to recognize shame and our triggers?
Right.
Because sometimes I think shame can disguise itself pretty well.
It definitely can. Shame can be sneaky, but one way to uncover it is to pay attention to those moments when you feel that intense urge to hide
Right.
or disappear.
Mm.
What triggered that feeling? Was it a comment someone made? A situation you were in?
Right.
And those triggers often relate to what Brown calls unwanted identities, right?
Yeah.
Like qualities or characteristics we don't want to be associated with.
Right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And to really understand how shame works, we need to dig deeper into these unwanted identities
Yeah. Oh.
and explore how they become triggers.
So we've started to uncover those shame triggers,
Yeah.
those unwanted identities that can leave us feeling so vulnerable.
Right.
But how do we actually start building resilience against shame? It feels kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
It's definitely a process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Brown breaks it down into those 4 elements we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Remember, they are
Yeah.
Recognizing shame and understanding your triggers.
Yeah.
Developing critical awareness of your personal shame web.
Okay.
Being willing to reach out for support.
Right.
And speaking shame.
Okay, so we've dipped our toes into the first element.
Right.
Recognizing those shame triggers.
Yeah.
What about the second one? This whole shame web thing is still a bit fuzzy for me.
So it's about understanding that our shame isn't just personal, it's also influenced by those layered societal and community expectations we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's like a web that's been spun over generations.
Oh, wow.
Dictating how we should behave, what we should look like, what
Right.
success should look like,
Yeah.
and so on.
And those expectations can be so different depending on like who you are
Exactly.
and where you come from. Right.
Absolutely. Brown's research dives deep into how shame is often organized by gender,
Okay.
with women facing a particularly complex set of expectations.
Oh, yeah. It's like we're constantly being bombarded with messages about who we should be.
Yeah.
The perfect mother.
Right.
The successful career woman.
Yeah.
The effortlessly beautiful friend. The list goes on and on.
It does.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is exhausting, and it's often contradictory.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Be assertive, but not too bossy.
Right.
Be vulnerable, but not too needy.
Yeah.
Be ambitious, but not at the expense of your family.
Oh, totally.
It's this impossible balancing act that sets us up for shame.
No wonder so many women feel like they're failing no matter what they do.
Right.
It's like the shame web is rigged against us.
It's this constant pressure to be everything to everyone, and it often leads to a sense of powerlessness,
Right.
which is a major breeding ground for shame.
So how do we start unraveling this web? It feels like it's woven into the very fabric of our culture.
That's where the third element of shame resilience comes in, being willing to reach out for support.
Okay, but reaching out for support can be terrifying,
It can be.
especially when shame tells us we're alone in our struggles,
Right.
that we're not worthy of help.
It definitely takes courage.
Yeah.
But this is where empathy plays such a crucial role.
So I remember you mentioned earlier that empathy is like the antidote to shame.
Yes.
But how does that actually work in practice?
Well, think back to that woman struggling financially.
Okay.
Let's say she finally works up the courage to confide in a friend, and instead of being met with judgment or advice, her friend simply listens with compassion and understanding.
That sounds so simple.
It does.
But I can imagine how powerful that would be. Just feeling heard
Yeah.
and validated can make a huge difference.
Exactly, and that's what true empathy is all about.
Okay.
Creating a space where those painful feelings can be shared without fear of judgment. It allows us to move from isolation to connection, which is essential for healing shame.
Okay, so empathy is key.
Yes.
But what about that fourth element, speaking shame? That sounds even scarier than reaching out for support.
It can be,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly empowering.
Okay.
It's about finding your voice to challenge those unrealistic expectations,
All right.
to break the silence and create a more compassionate and accepting world.
So instead of suffering in silence, we need to start talking about shame.
Yes.
But where do we even begin? It feels like such a taboo topic.
You're right. Shame thrives in secrecy.
Yeah.
But by speaking our truth, we chip away at its power. It can be as simple as sharing our experiences with trusted friends and family, or as bold as speaking out against harmful cultural messages.
So like if someone makes a comment about my weight, instead of just smiling awkwardly
Right?
and internalizing that shame,
Yeah.
I could actually say something like, you know, that kind of comment makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you might be surprised by the response.
Yeah.
Speaking your truth often creates space for others to do the same.
Okay.
And that's how we start to shift the culture around shame.
This is starting to feel less overwhelming
Good.
and more like something I can actually do.
Yes.
Like instead of being afraid of shame, I can start to see it as an opportunity for growth
Yes.
and connection.
And that's a powerful shift.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that vulnerability isn't a weakness.
Right.
It's a strength.
Yeah.
It takes courage to acknowledge our imperfections, but it's also what allows us to connect with others on a deeper level.
So if we can start to recognize our shame triggers, understand how those societal expectations are feeding into our shame,
Yeah.
reach out for support, and find the courage to speak our truth,
Yes.
then we can actually start to build resilience.
You got it.
Okay.
It's not about erasing our vulnerabilities. It's about transforming them into sources of strength and connection. It's about remembering that we're all perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
And in those imperfections lies the potential for incredible growth compassion, and connection.
Okay, so we've got this amazing toolkit for shame resilience.
Yes.
But let's be real, sometimes it's easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, shame is a master manipulator,
It is.
and it often tries to sabotage our efforts to be more resilient.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest hurdles Brown highlights is the tendency to confuse empathy with sympathy.
Wait, aren't they the same thing?
Hmm.
I always thought they were interchangeable.
They sound similar,
Yeah.
but they operate from very different places.
Okay.
Sympathy is more about feeling for someone, while empathy is about feeling with someone.
So sympathy is like, oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry you're going through that.
Right.
Well, empathy is more like, I can't imagine what you're going through,
Yeah.
but I'm here with you and I want to understand.
Exactly. Sympathy often keeps us at a distance,
Okay.
while empathy allows us to connect on a deeper, more vulnerable level.
I'm starting to see how that distinction is so important.
And Brown shares a powerful story in her book about being shamed for stealing a cookie as a child.
Oh, wow.
What she really needed was someone to understand that deep, visceral feeling of, I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Not someone to condone the stealing,
Right.
but someone to offer support instead of judgment.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's not about agreeing with someone's actions.
Right.
It's about connecting with the emotion beneath the experience.
Exactly, and that's what makes empathy so transformative.
Right.
It allows us to move from that place of shame and isolation to a place of connection and understanding.
Okay, so empathy is key. But how can we avoid falling into those sympathy traps? Like, are there any common pitfalls we should be aware of?
One common pitfall is what Brown calls sympathy seeking.
Okay.
It's when we're looking for validation of our pain
Okay.
rather than genuine connection.
So it's like that woe is me mentality
Yeah.
that can actually push people away.
Exactly. And on the flip side, we might encounter people who try to stack the deck,
Oh, yeah.
turning every shared experience into a competition of whose suffering is worse.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right.
It's like, you
Yes.
think you've got it bad.
Right.
Well, let me tell you about my situation.
Exactly.
It's that one-upmanship that completely misses the point of empathy.
And then there's the belief that some shame is good for us,
All right.
that it keeps us in line.
Right.
But Brown's research challenges this idea, suggesting that shame is inherently destructive,
Yeah.
regardless of the intent.
It's like that old saying, you can't shame someone into being a better person. In fact, shame often leads to more negative behaviors as we try to numb the pain or lash out in anger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we're going to cultivate true shame resilience,
Right.
we need to embrace empathy as the antidote, both in our own lives and in our interactions with others.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yes.
Empathy, empathy, empathy.
You got it. And that starts with challenging those societal expectations, those shoulds, that fuel so much of our shame.
It's about recognizing that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a strength,
Yes.
a necessary ingredient for authentic connection.
And ultimately, as Brown reminds us, we are all capable of developing shame resilience.
Yeah.
It's a journey, not a destination. And it requires practice, courage, and a whole lot of empathy.
Okay, so we've unpacked the 4 elements of shame resilience.
Yes.
Explored the power of empathy and talked about some common pitfalls to avoid.
Right.
What now?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? So we've got all these amazing tools for building shame resilience. And we know empathy is key.
Yes.
But how do we actually put this into practice, right, in our daily lives?
Yes.
Because let's be real, shame is sneaky.
It is.
And it's always lurking around the corner.
It definitely takes practice, but the first step is awareness.
Okay.
Start paying attention to those moments when shame whispers in your ear, those triggers we talked about.
Right.
Notice those unwanted identities that make you want to hide or disappear.
Okay, so I'm feeling that familiar twinge of shame.
Okay.
What's next?
Instead of giving in to the fear and blame, remember the power of empathy.
Okay.
You can practice self-compassion
Okay.
by talking to yourself kindly, just like you would a dear friend.
So instead of beating myself up for not being perfect,
Yeah.
I could try saying something like, hey, it's okay to feel this way. Everyone makes mistakes.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone.
Right.
Reach out to a trusted friend or family member
Yeah.
and share what you're going through.
I think that's where I often get stuck. Shame tells me I'm the only one who feels this way and that no one will understand.
But that's the shame talking.
Yeah.
Remember, Brown's research shows that shame thrives in isolation.
Uh-huh.
The more we share our experiences, the more we realize we're not alone in this.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
By opening up and connecting with others,
Uh-huh.
we're actually chipping away at the power of shame.
Exactly. And as you start to practice these tools, you'll notice something amazing begins to happen.
What's that?
The shame won't disappear completely,
Okay.
but it will have less power over you.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we expect shame to just vanish overnight.
Right.
But if we can learn to manage it
Yeah.
and build resilience, that's a huge win in itself.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And every time you choose courage over comfort,
Mm.
vulnerability over hiding, you're taking another step towards shame resilience.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
Good.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of shame. And more importantly, I feel equipped with tools to start building resilience.
I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
We all experience shame, but with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
empathy, and connection,
Mm-hmm.
we can reclaim our power and live more authentically.
And that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yes.
To live a life where shame doesn't hold us back
Exactly.
from being our true selves.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. What's one small step you can take today to start challenging shame in your own life? Maybe it's practicing self-compassion, reaching out to a friend, or simply noticing those shame triggers without judgment. Remember, every act of courage, no matter how small, makes a difference. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into shame resilience.